Welcome to Face to Face. We have with us the young author called Anas Alam Faizli, who's written Rich Malaysia, Poor Malaysians.
Thank you.
Currently in the oil and gas industry in the country. Okay, Anas, you wrote Rich Malaysia, Poor Malaysians.
Yes.
Okay, so there is the rich country and the poor Malaysians.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't there any rich Malaysians?
Of course there are. But the numbers is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you simple statistic, easy to digest.
Right.
From EPF database, 80% of our employees are earning below 3,000 ringgit a month.
80%.
80% of our employees are earning
nationwide,
3,000
earning below.
ringgit.
Okay.
So then there is this question, when you look at the household income, any household means husband and wife, earning above 15,000 ringgit a month is already top 1% of the income bracket in Malaysia.
Right.
So that begs the question, where is the middle class? What happened?
So is there a middle class?
Of course there is, but how much income are you referring to? Let's say 5,000 ringgit, that's representing 75%, and below representing 75% of Malaysian.
Right.
So I would prefer to say 15,000 ringgit is the middle class, but unfortunately it's not. It's only top 1%. It's among the richest in Malaysia. In fact, these numbers represent the inequality that is happening in Malaysia, the gap between the rich and the poor.
When did this? I mean, you did some studies on this. When did this gap start widening? What years did this gap of rich and poor, between the rich and poor, start widening?
Looking at the graph, you can see that the gap is trying to narrow down from the 70s to the 90s when they did the national economic policy. But it started to widen further from the 90s.
So from 90s onwards, we started having the very rich and the...
It has always been that, but how bad it is. So the gap has widened from the 90s, as you can see from the charts I placed in the book. It's easier for the rich to continue becoming rich because of the capital that they have. For the poor, to get them to break the poverty trap or to break the middle income trap takes a lot more effort. And the way I look at it is from independence towards today, we have to take a look back at the policies, economic policies that we are practicing.
Did NEP contribute to this? NEP, the National Economic Plans that the government had put through, did it contribute to this?
I think that the trickle down economy contributed to this. The idea, the notion that you have to enrich a few individuals and they will then enrich other individuals doesn't work. It didn't trickle down. It stays at the top.
When did this start? When did this notion, when did this idea start in Malaysia?
We're looking at the early 90s.
That's during Mahathir's time?
Yeah, during his era. We're looking at during his era. So now we have to try our level best to help the bottom 40% or the bottom 60%, the low wage earner. Our nation comprises of low income earners because out of the 12 million employees, only 14% is eligible to pay tax, which means our salary is low. As opposed to America or US or the other nation, like in England, 80% are paying tax.
And we have 14% of
the total employees eligible to pay tax, and that only contributes 10% of government's total income. So our employees are not earning much. So Malaysia comprised of people who earn small salary.
Would the minimum wage that they had just introduced, saying, you know, to cut down poor Malaysians. Would that help to increase?
That will help, but that is just one of the many vehicles that we need to have. If we want to close the gap between rich and poor, there is certain things that we need to implement.
And what is that?
Like recently we introduced GST. GST will not really help on inequality because we are taxing everybody, still the same. I would prefer we go for capital gain tax, where you tax those making capitals and rich, and you can take that
so
money.
those who have money are taxed more. The more money you have, the more tax you have, but that's what there's already
they are
happening.
the ones making capital.
All right, okay.
The stock market.
So you're talking about the business.
Yeah, the business.
Business.
And then we have to be more pro-worker and employees, and then we can help in terms of welfare. We can help in terms of simple example like having free nurseries, and that
maybe
will
the
help
NHS,
a lot. The NHS and the housing, housing and properties is the easiest way to help anyone accumulate wealth.
Because a big percentage of our wages goes for
housing and transportation.
Yes.
And if we have better infrastructure, better transportation, it helps a lot. From our GDP, our GDP is close to 1 trillion, right? Out of that, only 28% goes to the salary, to the pocket of the people. The remaining goes to corporate profits, tax and subsidies.
So that should be lessened.
It should be bigger. Like in other developed nations, it's normally 50 to 60%.
Right.
So Malaysia's economy, 1 trillion, only 28%
goes back to the people.
Goes to the pocket of and the salary of these people, our rakyat. So the numbers is quite low. And according to projections from ETT, from our calculation, it shows that the number is going down.
Right.
So that begs the question: are we doing the right thing?
Right. Is this rich and poor gap? Does it differ between communities? I mean, we have the standard Indian, Chinese, Malay. Does it differ between the communities?
It doesn't differ much. There are intra inequality and all, but I cannot give you a straight answer. I have to relook at the numbers.
Okay, you have not done study for that. Okay, and you also said a complete free education. You gave the solution. Educate the people. That might might reduce the gap.
Because our
more educated, more jobs.
Our tertiary educated Malaysian is only 25%, and I've done some numbers I've shown in the book how people with PMR total accumulated wealth is 75,000, whereas people with a degree can accumulate wealth average in Malaysia as high as 250,000 ringgit. So there's a big gap. And then the education profile shows how top 20% comes from those with better education background versus the bottom 40%, which most of them do not have paper qualification. But not just that, there are plenty of other things we can do, like upskilling, and then we have this issue with foreign workers flooding the market. Who are we protecting? Because are we protecting the businesses or are we protecting our people? Because when we have foreign workers flooding the market, it will affect
cheap labor. So
so it will affect our people. There will be salary distortion. Because coming from an oil and gas industry, I've seen local Malaysians working under the sun, scorching heat, doing welding. So it's a myth that our locals cannot do hard work, cannot do construction.
Well, if you pay them enough, they will do.
If you pay them enough, they will do it. Exactly. So to me, we can have foreign workers, but only at the plantation or at the houses as maid. Other industries like services, hotel, food industry, the construction, our cementers, we should have our locals doing that job, but we need to pay them more.
Right. And do you see that happening even with the minimum wage issue? That has not been really answered.
I think they are flooding more foreign workers in the country with the recent I read they're taking some more Bangladeshis into Malaysia.
Right. So you expect the gap to be wider in the near future with what's happening?
With what's happening, if there's nothing
Done now,
seriously, yeah.
then we will be ending up like Mexico, where we have the very poor and very rich.
In fact, by number, we are like that, except we are richer. The thing with inequality, like Afghanistan, Afghanistan is top 10 equal nation in the world because they are all poor.
All right, okay. And yeah.
But in our scenario, it's different because that's why people always attack me when I talk about inequality. Have you been to Indonesia? Have you been to the Philippines? Yes, I've been there, but they are poor and their gap is not as big as our gap. That's the difference. We're talking about the gap, the rich and the poor.
Right. So we'll talk more about that. And with that, we wrap up the segment 3 of Face to Face.